Welcome to episode 27 of the International Web Effectiveness Podcast, where Bill Hunt and I, Bill Scully, focus on the strategies and techniques necessary to improve your web presence and manage your global websites. In episode 26, we asked, why isn't international SEO integrated across teams? And we talked about why it's essential for international SEO activities. And in 2025, our recommendation is to make SEO a team sport. Continuing with that, in this episode, we're going to discuss the SEO team sport idea in depth with some examples and the different opportunities for integration from our experiences. All right, so let's get into the topic. What creative ways can we integrate search into other digital projects?
Where can't we? I mean, that's the interesting thing. We should be trying to align it everywhere we can. And, I think on the integrating one, I mentioned that pesky Latin America country region manager that, didn't even want me to talk to his team about search until I could show all the ways it could be integrated into other marketing activities that they do. And so what I did is I mentioned what I did over lunch that day was basically create a slide for every type of marketing we were doing, from email to TV commercials to print ads. I'm trying to find ways, most of them I just pulled out of the air, ways that we could integrate search with those. And he ended up saying, wow, this is pretty cool, because his point was his people were already overloaded with things to do. And then, he comes from the experience set of every SEO consultant was different, telling them to fix things or unravel things that they had just fixed and things like that. So it was interesting. I mean, one that I've always been a fan of was aligning it with TV commercials. And we're going to talk about this under campaigns, a separate episode on campaigns. But really quickly, imagine, this is the question I always ask. How might someone look for this commercial after seeing it and not remembering what brand? They probably remember the product, they probably remember something, but let's say, like, the most common one that I know you and I have had with similar clients is who did the music, especially if they're using an up-and-comer or really catchy music as part of it. People want to know who did the music in the video, or others, there might be a catchphrase. And I'll probably save the really juicy example for the campaign episode, but there was one major tourist destination that had a TV campaign, and basically their marketing team refused to follow our recommendations and add things into their web pages. And it turned out they had to write a big check to one of their affiliate partners who basically made a small fortune using those very words that they refused to integrate and brought traffic in through organic search than they actually booked. And so that's one of these interesting things is that we at least want to be there when people do it. And it's interesting how many people fight that idea of, we don't want to mention the commercial, but why not? Right? Especially if there's, a takeaway or any kind of offer. This is just one way to simply say, hey, I'm the search person. Can you use these words, phrases, concepts? This is the tagline that we had in it. This is whatever. An interesting thing, because one of the recommendations we wanted to make sure we cover is, what can we give people? And I know that was one thing you wanted to make sure that for each of these, I think 5 or 6 episodes ago, you used the phrase, help me help you. And I think, what if we're launching a new product? An interesting way to see, obviously, we've got all the fancy brand awareness surveys and studies and all that stuff that's very expensive. But to me, a very inexpensive thing is have people increase the searches for it.
Yeah, a simple lift in brand search. If you're running, TV ad or even a print ad, you need to think about the customer journey. They might see that and not have the time to learn more about it. They may remember the next day, whoever does this specific product or service. And if it's a new service, you need to obviously support the service without the brand search as part of it. But just take a look at all of your brand searches, all the combinations, and was there a lift as a result of your marketing efforts? And
exactly,
if you've done a good job, it should, right? Because you're creating awareness, you're creating demand, and then you need to figure out all of the different ways people, like you said, search, not knowing exactly what they're supposed to do after a TV commercial. Make sure you rank number one. Make sure you're answering all their questions. And I think people don't think about the benefit that the web provides after some of these non-digital campaigns, like, how much influence are you going to have in a commercial? Not that much, but once they land on your site, there are so many different things that you can do to get them to move down the funnel.
And little things like, let's say you introduce like they'll often tell you, like a lot of podcasts will have this, okay, put in the name or something like that, And so those codes, right? Making sure that you reference those codes. And it's sort of a dual-edged sword, right? I've had people with coupon codes. I remember once presenting at a conference on a outdoor retailer and showed, because I went there to buy something and I saw the little field that was like coupon code. Right. So right away, I'm like, I'm missing out on something. There must be a code because they have it on the form. Right. So the first thing I did was Google, the brand name plus coupon code. And, there's like 8 or 9. Now there'd be like 50 gazillion people trying to get me to come get the code. But at the time I think there was 8 or 9 that I showed in the example. And it got me thinking, and they weren't there. Nowhere could I find this code. It was like you had to be a member and it was a super secret handshake code. But they had it on the form, which prompted me to want to. So again, this goes back to this team sport. It's like, hey guys, if we're going to have a code, human nature, people are going to look for the damn code.
Yeah.
Right.
I've seen some really good execution where they actually have the codes on their own site. So There's no friction. If somebody sees that field and, they're like me, the first thing I'm going to do is search for it. They would rank number 1. This company, can't remember who it was. They actually ranked number 1 with their own codes, and that you knew they were right because they had the date and all that stuff.
And what's interesting strategy with that is, and this is one that these guys ended up doing because apparently they were in the audience because they presented like 5 years later about their coupon code strategy. And he told me that, he'd never thought of it until he heard me. Like you said, on the website, you can have like a 5% off code and then have a link for them to get a bigger discount, the equivalent discount of their friends and families or their email members or whatever it is, their affiliate club, their member club by joining. So it's a great way where we've combined these, right? Now, somebody came to buy, they were fully willing to buy until they saw the code field. They went and looked for the code field. Hopefully, as you said, if you put a code in, or at least have a page with valid codes. And this is where I've seen it done fairly well in 2 different ways. One is they put a valid code and it is valid. You can do it without any action on your part. And then they also have an incentive that if you sign up and do X, you can get a bigger discount if you do it. So you can then see A, how many people came for the code, and B, how many people did it. And I think that's, another way where you get multiple, points of interaction. An interesting thing that Zappos did was Zappos didn't have codes. And so Zappos had a Zappos code page to tell people that they didn't have discount codes. So all these scammers that were offering Zappos discount codes, they were basically saying, if you find these Zappo discount code sites, and, I'm not going to mention them because everybody's lawsuit happy these days, but if you come across them, ignore them because we don't have codes. And so I thought that was a brilliant use, the anti-code retail checkout code page.
Yeah.
Was an interesting one. And I think that ties into one thing you mentioned as we were talking before, is tying it into email. It's the same thing. I've done this where I remember seeing something on sale and maybe I'll, go search my email for it, look for the code and do that, or other things they might have told me about. Like, here's a great example. We're thinking for our fall trip to Japan, United just started opening up trips to Mongolia from Tokyo. So direct flights. I wanted to know what days of the week they flew. God forbid I could actually find that on United. But I remember seeing it in like one of the points emails that I got. So I Googled, United Mongolia flight days. And sure enough, what came up was the article from, it's whatever it is, the points guy or something, was his post where he covered it and then, carried that over into his email. So it just reinforced it. I got to put this post up. There was a great chain example of this that just made me think of a deal on some scuba regulators, where I took screenshots of my entire process from seeing a Facebook message about them being on sale for the next couple of days, all the way to an email from a dive shop to, it was just, the point is getting back to the team sport, there was none of these people, the manufacturer, the regulator, the dive shop, the dive forum, if you will. Nobody had all the information because nobody thought, like you said, the bicycle. They might have said, hey, we're going to have this sale. And what was interesting is that on the day of the sale, the final day of the sale, which was, I think, Halloween, it was actually my local dive shop that happened to post on Facebook, today's the last day of this discount. And it's like, had they not done that, I would have totally forgot about it. Now, again, you're more of a marketer than I am. So, you understand everybody was about urgency, getting people at the moment we first sent it. And that, I wasn't hip to it at that moment, but it was that final post. And then actually when I went to my dive shop to find the code because, I couldn't find it on Facebook after that, it wasn't there. So again, none of the synergies were there. Right. And I think this illustrates this whole point where we got to think through the bicycle, the point you made about even the TV commercial. People are going to search. So make sure you're in search. People are going to look if they're an email member, they're going to look through email and finding ways to any creative way you can by hook or by crook to get these synergies to say, how do we play nicely together? I think you had a couple other ideas of some things you've done to try to get people to play nicely.
Yeah. And I guess we started off talking about SEO, but what, you and I are really focused on is web effectiveness. And, that goes beyond SEO. But if we're just talking about SEO isn't just about ranking. It impacts revenue, branding. It can hurt if you don't do it right. And there's so many different things that digitally you can support all of the efforts. Think of offline events like going to a conference. Companies don't do this. You can rank for that conference name. I mean, how many times have you searched for, some X hotels in Boston? You can basically have a page about I would only recommend you doing this if you have a booth, but if you had a booth, you could have like a 1 page, I wouldn't call it a PDF. Back in the days, we would actually have PDFs, but like all of the things to do in the town, all of the hotels close to it, restaurants, all that kind of stuff. Then mixed in with that is your booth, the different presentations you're giving, the speakers you have there, call to action to set up appointments. You could create that page to rank. You could take that page and give it to your email team and they could promote it through their email. You could then send it out to all your distributors. There's so many different ways that you can take digital assets, integrate that with search, fan it out to the different teams. They don't all have to be digital. Obviously, PR is another avenue as well. You can take that page and those talking points and give that to PR. They can do their PR spin on that. There's so many different ways you can really make things more effective.
So events.
For events. Just for
I'm
events.
glad you mentioned it. Events. This is an area that I think a lot of people squander. I remember back in the old days.
It used to be the number one line item in our marketing budgets. Like they would be like, 70% of the marketing cost. Honestly, at the end of the event, you'd have a list of 200 names, send them out to the salespeople, and the salespeople wouldn't even contact them.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
We need to do an episode on just this because, like you said, number one is, do you rank for your event if you're the event host? The other interesting thing is that we used to write all these guides, right? Because we would sponsor, some of the big companies I've worked at and with these events. And one of the things that these events do prominently as part of your sponsorship and stuff like that is they link to you. Yeah. And when you're a big company, like I'll give you an example at IBM. IBM sponsored, I don't know how many events. And what was interesting is our events sponsorship deal people, they would always fill out the form with the URL as ibm.com, the homepage. And we went and trained them. And I think this is getting back to web effectiveness. How do we make it all work together? So we started telling them, look, if this is a conference for cloud computing or supply chain management or whatever it is, we want you to link to that.
Yeah.
And so when the IBM logo or the Cisco logo or the Dell logo is on there, the fact that we're sponsoring, especially if we're a marquee sponsor, we want it, and we are multi-product, multi-solution companies, you want that to go to the solution that represents that conference. Because think about that authority.
The customer
right?
journey. You don't want them to try to figure it out from the homepage. Plus, you're getting that fantastic link to boost the category.
Here's two other really cool things. So two people that I think are some of the smartest people in the world. Turbo Todd Watson, that's his actual name, and he's just one of the few people that got to a vanity email address at IBM. And Julio Fernandez, who's now at Cisco. These guys, what they did, both had search backgrounds, had digital backgrounds, and what they sold into the company is, let me go to the events and let me set up an interview booth, especially their events, like Cisco and IBM does their own big events, and then let me set up a booth, just two chairs, a microphone, and let me interview the more prominent speakers immediately after their session, whether it's keynotes or whoever. And they would interview these guys. And what we would do is, we got a video. And we would put the video up on the company website, and then it would obviously be in YouTube. And then that would have a transcript. Then we take the transcript and put that on the website. And so what was interesting is people were Googling these things, or they were looking for concepts or the speaker or any. I think Todd and Julio both created this mind map of like 20 or 30 different connection points of how people might connect to this content. And so it basically, paid for them to go do this, set up the booth, schlep the gear there. But the amount of traffic that we drew and people linking to these interviews and things like that was just exponential. So again, it's this idea of how can we co-opt into other things and be part of that? And then how do we make sure we have a place on the website for this and that it's indexable? So again, it's not just a search thing. And I think that's a great point of bringing it back to overall web effectiveness is how do we improve the web by working better together? The search people, can the PR people, can the analytics people, can anybody, doing something on the web, can we share this information so that other people can benefit from it? Same thing with cross market. I was talking to someone this morning and they're going out from an analytics perspective and trying, because we found with hreflang, as we talked about in the X default episode, a lot of companies that have market centric or regional centric websites are often set up differently than other markets. So like say the US might have hreflang in place one way and Europe might have it another way. In talking about this person said, I thought about this and I bet there's an analytics setup that's different. That Europe, because it's a totally separate web setup, their analytics may be different and have problems that they don't have in another market or region. And so now we've taken what was a defect in hreflang and specific to X default, that's now been extrapolated by someone who was listening to say, I bet there's the same problem in analytics. And what we deduced is, imagine if people, and this is an experience I had while sitting in a meeting in Tokyo, Japan, there was an anomaly in the data where people were looking for a certain type of problem. And it was a problem that was both specific to their software and a competitor's software. And people were looking for a solution. And obviously, the engineers fed it back and said, okay, we got to fix this. But we immediately sent out a blast to all the content teams around the world and said, guys, we just saw this anomaly in Japan. Do you have this anomaly? And if you do, or even if you don't, let's get ahead of it and try to create content. We'll obviously mitigate the problem before it's a global problem. But for whatever reason, Japan saw it first or wrote about it first. And we started to mandate every market, if there was any data anomaly, an increase, a decrease, an increase in bugs, an increase in somebody liked a feature or function, that we shared that so that other people could figure out how they can leverage it in their market. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about, right? Can we have people that can run fast and then throw the ball to somebody else and they then can make the shot, or whatever the analogy we want to use is trying to get people to tee other people up to make them better.
Yeah, a high-ranking blog post that answers sales objections is basically a 24/7 sales rep. And if someone converts on the web from that, they're definitely further down the funnel. There's so many ways other groups can benefit and can support SEO. Let's talk about some other stuff.
I'm a fan of paid data, right? like click data. If we're getting clicks on messages, can we share those? Like one of my favorite things that I did a lot of when my first agency was bought by WPP, we were put in Young and Rubicam. And one of the first things we worked on was some paid for a, telephone company. I don't even know we use the word telephone anymore. Anyways, they were heavy direct mail. I mean, they were just hammering people with direct mail because that was sort of the method that was working for this particular brand. And one day we happened to be in a joint meeting and they were watching them brainstorm all of these, what are they, the teasers on the envelopes and talking about envelope open rates and form fill out rates based on that, or calls and all the different ways that they measured it. And I'm sitting there looking at this and I'm like, wow, those look very much like paid search ads. And I said, why don't we take the next batch and run them in paid search and see how they open in paid search?
Yeah.
And how about we take these that are performing in paid search and you noodle on them for email, both email and direct mail. So snail mail, and that. And we then became part of the team. So they started inviting us. I mean, it was this really cool dynamic where, we were testing things for them. They were testing things for us, because the idea was if we could get people to open a physical letter based on a statement, the probability that they would click on that ad and paid was pretty high. And I thought that was a really interesting synergy between what we were like, okay, boomer type direct mail. Who even opens that stuff anymore? And then we got email, which was killing it in terms of the biggest thing driving for them, even more than TV commercials. So getting those synergies with these people, these other teams, I think can be magical if you do it right.
Yeah, that's. I'm going to show my age here, but when I was a marketing manager, we used to do these threefold direct mail pieces. And what I was doing was I was actually split testing the message for our print ads. Not so different, right? So we would send out two different images and wordings on the thing to get them to open it. And the way we would get feedback was there was a bingo card inside to get the bulletin, and the winner of the tests, basically, that's how we built out our print ad campaign for the year. But I think that's pretty smart. You could go in the other direction too. You could have your paid ad group tell your email group what's working as far as click-through rates, influence titles for emails. And then, the thing that we haven't talked about is what is converting in paid. Like if we know what's converting in paid, we need to make sure that those are the things that we're really focused on for search.
And everywhere. I think that's the key with this, right? If we know these messages are converting and these landing pages are converting, because, the one thing that I've always argued with search is, and, I'm more known as an SEO person, although I don't really do SEO much anymore, is I've always said that paid, is people, they made the query. They have a vested interest in whatever they're looking for. And with paid, we have the precision to be able to, whatever we want, put whatever message and test the hell out of it in front of people. Think about all the other people that could benefit, both, like you said, print. Can we take this and share it with print? Can we make this a headline, or can we use it in social media? Can we sort of take this and share it with the world within the organization and say, is there anybody else that could benefit from this? And I think that's landing page creative. What worked for social, what worked for, any other campaign that we've done, and just sharing it. And even if this gets back to like high-end econometric modeling, where they dump everything into the data set and really look at what's working. But I think these are the kind of things. This is where we're more than just, especially on the SEO side, people complaining about needing code changes for stuff. We're now sharing data. I think if we take a quick segue now, we mentioned before the call, there's so much distraction, I think, in the search industry right now there's people that are going hardcore AI, only AI, 10 blue links is dead to me, even though Google just said there's 5 trillion searches being done in those 10 blue link environments. And then there's other people that are like, no, it's the same stuff, different format. And then there's other people that's like, hey, nobody even talks about Google anymore. It's just all about people searching in AI or using social media, or now the one that I'm seeing people talk about is the number of queries that people are seeing coming through, circle search, where people like I have a Google phone and, it's pretty easy. You can circle something in a picture and it will go search for it. And, so yeah, life is changing. Technology is changing. But at the end of the day, it's, how did we get our picture in front of them in the first place? Did we get this and that? And I think this is one of the things that I think we should help champion from the whole web effectiveness viewpoint is how do we get all of these constituents, all of these stakeholders to prepare our environment, our web environment for the new, I don't even want to say the new AI scenario, but for the AI scenario, that how do we make sure that it's crawlable? It's interesting now the number of people I'm seeing post on like LinkedIn that, yeah, my company, we blocked AI bots from coming in, but now my manager is complaining that we're not getting any traffic from AI bots. Again, it's this whole thing. We need to think about this as adults and grown-ups and say, okay, now we have a common enemy, if we will. We have a common objective. Let's pool together and figure out how do we get crawled? How do we get indexed? How do we leverage this messaging? Because it's an interesting thing that I posed the other day to someone. How, again, in my VP of Answer post, I said, what happens when everybody's like, don't bother because we can't get any clicks from it. But how embarrassing is it if you're the market leader? And I actually gave an example of a query that I did. If you're one of the leaders in a technology and somebody says, who's the best at, or you ask this magical 21-word prompt to your AI tool of choice, and in the results set, your company is not there.
Yeah, I
right?
think, who is it? Marie Haynes says, do a search for what is X known for, and it'll spit out an answer. And if the answer's not right, you haven't done your job. I meant to send you a link to an article exploring the impact of AIOs on web search from Terrakeet, and the author is Adi, I'm not going to pronounce his last name. Yeah, I'm going to try. Shirkanth, Srikanth. And he's got a really great breakdown of, they call it no AI web pages, no AI web pages with excluded versus excluded web pages, and included web pages versus excluded web pages. Basically, if you're in the top 3 and you're in the AIO, or if there's no AIO, and if you're in the lower, 7, and you need to be in the AIO. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And yeah, I have to agree with you that it seems like there's 2 camps. One camp that says you can optimize for it. The other camp that says you should just be doing what you're doing. I don't know what the right answer is, but you need to be in there.
I think you need to be in there. I think you need to move that direction. Because
sure.
Imagine in some markets, as people start to adopt this, especially maybe emerging markets or even major markets around the world, we want to be there when people start to use this. At some point, it's we're already seeing a lot of people using it. We just need to be there. We're not here to debate this, at least in this episode, of how to do it. The point of all that statement was, let's rally the troops. Let's come up with how we want to attack this holistically from a search perspective, from a digital perspective, from an advertising perspective, a brand perspective, because I think it's interesting when you do, it's here, it's coming fast. And I think the longer we perpetuate and do whatever we're doing and not doing, the harder it's going to be. And I think coming back to this idea of web effectiveness, do we have as much of our infrastructure humming as possible? One of the things that we were talking about focusing on as we go forward is really trying to, if you will, wring the towel to maximize the effectiveness of our website. In an article I was writing the other day, I was trying to find some simple statistics on click rates, conversion rates. And I saw one that was saying the average conversion rate now in main markets is like 1.5%, right? And I'm always the person that looks at the other side of the data, right? And this was like 3 or 4 studies, because I'm like, that seemed pretty low. And yes, there are anomalies where it's higher and, people got 50%. I know, don't, send your cards and letters. But the point is, this one was an aggregate of like 10,000 or 20,000 websites, just across the board. It was relatively low. Now, let's just say it's 10%, right? Live in la la land and say it's 10%. That means 90% didn't. can we affect that 90% in some way? Whether it's flow through on the website, whether it's, like you mentioned earlier, somebody doing a particular query and it sets them in a phase of the buy cycle that may be further down. Do we have something to greet them and carry them to the next step? Is there friction? Are we asking too much of people? And I think these are some things that we should look into on future episodes of, take one or two of these things that are impacting, a majority of our visitors not converting, especially those that we can identify as being further along in the buy cycle, and find ways to convert them. And again, this goes back to team sport. Imagine if the analytics people were feeding something back to saying, this is the point of drop off. This is where they came in from. This is their pain point. And can we deduce anything from this? And by doing that, can we lift it by 1%? 2%, 5%. I think that's what all this is about. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and you need to think of SEO like compound interest. I mean, the earlier you start, the bigger the payoff is going to be over time. And as you work through all of those different unique things people could be searching for, the problems they have, that lives on the web, and it helps build your brand.
I mean, that's a great point. And I think that goes back to any change that can have material benefit to your website, because we talked, fairly early on about, that report that I used to use it was the At Now report, where I would take all of the tickets and sort of an approximation of how much traffic we thought we could get from fixing that element. And then we used to use an At Now calculation and say, okay, if every month we thought we could get 10,000, more visitors, and if we fixed this thing that impacted conversions positively, remove some friction or something, if that was 5,000 additional conversions, well, if we're 6 months in from that ticket being submitted, that's 6 times 5,000.
Yeah.
And that's exactly your point, that every period that we delay implementing this fix to fix something else that may be more important, maybe less important, the more it is. And I think, again, this is the idea of thinking about this as team sport is, can we give data? And the last thing that I sort of had is how we can help out from a team sport is write good tickets wherever you are in the organization. Whether you're PR wanting a better landing page or paid search wanting a better landing page or anything, new product launches, making sure you've got that ticket that says these things need to be in there. Make sure you write that into the ticket to say, this is what I expect is the outcome. This is the reference to how to do it correctly. And these are the 3 or 4 things that you should test to make sure you've done it correctly. And I think these are the kind of things that, again, wherever you are in the organization, applying these factors to your tickets are going to help those people in that ticket ecosystem, to do a better job. And I think, again, thinking holistically across the enterprise, the more we can join forces, help other people do their job more efficiently, the better we're all going to be and the more we're all going to benefit.
Yeah, I think, spot on there. One other thing I want to add is, paid ads. If you could just reach out to the paid ads team and ask them for the highest converting, meaning percentage-wise keywords, that's a great set of keywords, probably keywords you don't rank for today, because if they're the highest converting, there's probably low search volume for them. And you could easily incorporate that into your SEO program. That's a no-brainer and a single reach out.
Cool. Yeah, I think this is plenty of examples of why SEO should be a team sport.
Great. I want to remind people of our free Facebook group, where we use that as an opportunity to discuss these things, and you can ask any questions you want. You can also suggest ideas for upcoming podcasts. You can find that by searching International Web Mastery Free Group. Well, I'm going to propose that our next podcast, what we should talk about is like all the specific details around campaigns and how people can work together on that, how you can measure that kind of stuff. Do you have any final words?
No, I think that's good. Yeah, come check out our training. We've got a variety of training. I've added to my Epiphanies training, which is free. It's just the various things that I've experienced over the years that have had me pivot into different ways of thinking. We've got the various hreflang courses, as well as we've got courses on, building business cases. And we're working almost finished with our developer SEO for developers course. And then
I'm excited to aggregating that one. The developers course.
It's good. I like it. It's a totally different spin on how people typically approach this. So yeah, go check those out. Follow us on Facebook if there's a topic that we haven't talked about that you think we should, especially related to web effectiveness. Let us know. And yeah, we'll do our best to try to cover it.
Great. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Bill Scully. I just wanted to let you know that we have a free training course called Demystifying hreflang. It includes 6 modules and is over an hour long with a quiz at the end of each module. You can find it at internationalwebmastery.com. Hope to see you there.